Before wheels existed, before cities and kings, before anyone learned to record sound in symbols, horses already roamed. They wandered the plains, stretching from horizon to breath. They were not led. They moved of their own will, not because they sought something, but because it was embedded in their essence, movement. The first herds appeared where space exceeded fear. Northern plains, Asian steppes, cold plateaus, places where only the hardy survived, and the horse was among them. Its heart beat steadily even when the wind turned to snow. Its hooves remembered hard, soft, slippery, dry, heavy ground. The herd did not stop, because the herd has no home. Its home is movement. Humans appeared later. They watched, observed, and marveled, not at speed or strength, but at how horses stayed together, how they listened to one another without words, how one could lead and all would follow. The first contact was timid. It was not a bid to tame, it was an attempt to draw near. In cave paintings older than any empire, there's already a horse, simple but accurate, a neck's curve, extended legs, a tail, the herd an imprint of time. Those artists had no paints, but they had feeling. And that feeling was respect. At first, wild horses were prey. They were caught for meat and hide. But even then, a line was drawn. They were not wiped out without need, because something in their behavior held humans at bay. An invisible boundary, a silence that could not be broken without consequences. Then came domestication, not by force, but by patience. Someone learned to be alongside, not to take, but to live together. And the horse allowed it, not because it was compelled, but because sometimes a bond arises where it's least expected. And from that moment, humans and horses shared their stories. With horses, new lands were discovered. With horses, battles were fought. They pulled plows, carried families, rescued in blizzards, died beneath arrows. They did not choose, but they were there. Wherever there was motion, wherever there was a path, they were present. Yet a part of them remained untamed. Wild herds, memory of the first, of what came before. They disappeared from most maps. They were displaced. They were captured. But some places held, places where horses still ran, leaving no trace. They didn't flee. They simply rejected the human world. And the herd lived by its own rule. In a herd, there are no heroes, no victors. There are elders, experienced. There are those who go first but don't always lead. And there are watchers, and in that watching, wisdom. When a human left, the herd continued. New ones were born, old ones died, but the motion did not stop. And always someone stood ahead, to whom all listened. Not for strength, not for speed, but for calm. Different cultures held the horse as a symbol. For nomads, it was part of the soul. For northern tribes, it was a guide. For rural communities, it was livelihood. It wasn't just an animal, it was presence. Like rain, like day, like silence. But with the advent of centuries, machines, motors, the horse receded, became memory, became function, became hobby. But the wild ones, they didn't vanish. They didn't need attention. They didn't demand space. Space enough to be was sufficient. As long as there was steppe, mountain pass, grass not yet fenced, there existed the herd. Humans had lived with horses for centuries, some side by side, others positioned above. Where a creature became routine, it ceased to be truly seen. It became a tool, power, part of daily labor. In that village, horse catching was a craft passed down through generations, not cruelly, not mocking, just the work, like someone tending a field. Others tended a herd. A boy grew up beside his father. The father was a renowned catcher, respected not for wealth, but for skill. He knew how to sneak up on a herd, how to feel the wind, pick the moment. They did not fear him. They avoided him. For horses always sense those who come to capture. Everything the father taught, the boy learned. He could read tracks, calculate trajectory, even spot weaknesses in a herd from afar. But over the years, something in him did not resonate with this knowledge. He carried out the work, but didn't accept it. He first understood this when he was small. One stallion captured by his father stood apart, wild, unyielding, allowed no one near. It fought, broke free, then simply fell silent. It stood, not eating or moving, only staring into space for hours. The boy came close, not with food or rope, but just sat beside it. The stallion didn't react. But after a few minutes, it turned its head. And in that gaze was something unforgettable. Calm, yet profound loneliness. As if the horse already knew its fate and had accepted it. From that moment, something changed. The boy began visiting the pen at night, quietly, without noise. He brought water, sometimes fresh grass. They grew used to him. They no longer turned away, yet they didn't approach. It was enough for them that he posed no threat. His father noticed and disapproved. "Don't look into their eyes too long," he said. "They remember, and then it hurts. Don't love them, catch them." But the boy did not argue. Could not. He only remained silent. And the more he stayed silent, the more he realized this trade did not belong to him. When his father went to the steppe, the boy took a different path, one without traps. He searched for herds, but not to hunt. He simply wanted to see how they lived undisturbed. And the more he observed, the clearer it became. There was something ungraspable in them. Sometimes a herd would vanish in the grass before his eyes. Sometimes they'd stand silent on the horizon until he drew close. They knew he wouldn't capture, and they allowed him near for a time. Over time, he began recognizing individuals who always led, who guarded, who stayed apart. He noted shifts in hierarchy. Younger stallions sometimes challenged. The old stepped back. It was a wordless language, but it spoke volumes. One morning before dawn, he awoke feeling unease. Beyond the house, it was quiet, yet the ground trembled. He stepped outside and saw it. In the field, a dark line stirring. A herd. They moved swiftly, and not with the wind. It was odd. No chase, no threat, but they urgently pressed on. He tried following. The path was familiar, but at a point they veered into a place he'd never been. A narrow pass through hills leading to a rocky valley. The silence here was denser. That morning he didn't reach its end, but something in him changed. The herd was not merely going forward. They seemed to call, without sound. It was the first time he wasn't just observing. He felt himself become part of the movement. They changed direction. Not abruptly like a spooked herd, but smoothly, as if guided by an unseen hand. The one he had watched these days no longer returned to familiar meadows. They moved toward barren, rocky terrain, with narrow passes among cliffs, countryside rarely touched by human feet. He followed, not hiding, not closing in, just maintained distance. He knew, if they didn't want him, they wouldn't allow it. Yet now they didn't flee. Even when he appeared in open ground, they watched silently. Some horses paused and turned their heads. And one, the black new leader, held its gaze longer. Not hostile, calm, but as if it knew more. After a few days, he noticed the herd's movement lacked clear destination. They circled, lingered, slowed, suddenly changed course. Yet no confusion, only a strange cyclicity, as if they were seeking or leading. And they watched him, not always, but enough to be noticed. On the fourth morning, he rose earlier than usual. The ground was dry, the sky low. He set off cross-country, toward where he'd last seen them. Again they moved, and again they didn't flee. They walked deeper into the gorge, toward an ancient dry stream bed. He walked an hour, two, no fatigue, only focused calm. The step was different, grass absent, the silence echo-free. Then suddenly the herd stopped. No commotion, no tension. They all froze as one figure. The boy also halted. Minutes passed, nothing happened. Then one horse lifted its head and looked down into the ravine. Others followed, and he approached, slowly, step by step, without haste. At the bottom lay something dark. At first he didn't understand. Then he saw a horse lying in a hollow between stones, its front leg pinned. It didn't move, but was alive. He saw its breath, barely perceptible, but clearly there. And the eye, open. No cry, no whinny, just a look. Calm and direct, bearing weight, not of pain, but of time. He knelt, looked. Stones shifted beneath his feet, but he did not stop. Everything was silent. Even the herd above stood as stone. It was a large horse, perhaps the biggest he'd ever seen. Black, almost without sheen. Its body dust-covered, a little blood marking the trapped leg. It did not struggle, did not plead, but did not give in. It just lay and waited. The boy knelt and stared. He had to dislodge one block. His hands cut, sweat dripped. He remained silent, and so did the horse. When he freed the leg, the horse didn't rise at once. It only turned its head and met his eyes. In that moment, he felt he was looking not just into an animal, but into something timeless. There was no fear, no submission, something else. As if he wasn't the first to reach here, and not the first encounter. The horse rose slowly with dignity, wavering but upright, one of the unbridled few. Not by force, but by an inner straight line, from calm to freedom. Then he realized this was no ordinary herd horse. This was the leader, the one none had captured. For someone else, this would be a prize, a conquest. For the boy, it was not. It was a meeting. He did not attempt to touch. He did not move closer. He stood still. The horse stepped away a few paces, lifted its head toward the herd, and began to rise. The herd accepted him without sound. A slight stir, a few steps back. The space opened and he led again. The boy remained in the ravine's depth. He breathed dust, watching their silhouettes recede. Just as he prepared to leave, he noticed a gleam. Amid the stones lay an object, small, round, partly covered in earth. He bent and touched it. It was a horseshoe, old. He was surprised. The horse he'd freed wore no shoe, and wild horses never wear shoes. Yet this horseshoe lay right here, smooth, heavy, inscribed. Not with letters or numbers, but something reminding of a wavy line. Though unlit, its metal exuded warmth, quiet. He pocketed it without hesitation and lingered in that ravine, not because he couldn't leave, but because he didn't want to break silence. On the way home, the shoe felt heavy, not in mass, but in meaning. He didn't hurry. The day was tilting toward evening. He walked the path once used by his father, from hills through plains to the village, where grass still existed, not just dust. The herd vanished swiftly as usual. Once they halted on the horizon, dark silhouettes against the sky, as proof all really happened. Then they disappeared. The wind softened, and only the path home remained. He told no one. Not that evening, not the next morning. He stashed the horseshoe in an old chest beneath the shirts he no longer wore. Yet thoughts of it returned, not intrusively, but lingering, like something unfinished. Days passed. Then he remembered the notebook. Long ago, when he was little, he saw his father writing in an old, thick black notebook. It was never shown. He said, "It's not important, just notes." Then it was forgotten. It lay in the basement with other unused things, bridles, ropes, worn-out boots. One afternoon, he descended there and rummaged, quietly, slowly. Everything smelled leather, dust, old sweat. When he opened the chest, he found it. Just there, the cover darkened with age but intact, and embossed on it a delicate pattern, a curved line strikingly similar to one on the shoe. He sat on the floor and opened it. Inside, it wasn't exactly a diary, more a notebook of observations, notes, sketches. It held dates, herd names, routes, mentions of specific horses. But among them were passages utterly unlike those of a catcher. One entry dated 30 years earlier spoke of a horse that couldn't be caught, and noted, "It sometimes seems he isn't fleeing, but leading." Another, an old stallion, black, without a single mark, admits no one, looks at you, not because he fears humans, but because he remembers. The deeper he read, the more he realized. His father had seen him, the same horse, the one he freed in the ravine. There were descriptions of similar places, the rocky pass where earth seems empty underfoot, and another mention of the horseshoe, found it by chance across the river, lay in the sand, the metal unlike any in our land, the symbol, like water that doesn't stand still. I've shown it to no one. This was a different one, another horseshoe but similar. He closed the notebook and sat long in silence. Dusk fell outside. The air smelled of earth, and he felt the same silence he'd felt in the ravine. Not deaf, not dead, but full. He wondered, why was this never spoken? Why had his father, who spent so much time with herds, kept these notes and never spoke? Perhaps he didn't know how, or perhaps it could not be told. Some things aren't meant for words. They are meant to be felt, to leave a trace without explanation. The next morning, he brought the horseshoe out, placed it on the table beside the notebook, softly. Both items looked equally foreign and familiar. There was no fear or revelation, only clarity. He didn't know what would come next, but he understood it was only the beginning. From then he began dreaming, not nightly, not consecutively, but when dreams came, they stayed long. The dreams were neither vivid nor alarming. No words, no events, only step. And the horse. Always one, black, standing at a distance, watching, neither approaching nor calling, but something in that gaze made him awake with the feeling that not everything remained in the night. At first he ignored it, thought perhaps recollection, but the dream repeated, again. Each time the step differed, windy, grassy, bleak, but the horse was the same, standing and watching, and the silence surrounding was identical to that in the ravine. By day he grew more restless, not anxious but attentive. He listened to the wind, to the ground beneath his feet, to how birds rose from grass. Sometimes he sensed something waited beyond the horizon, not a place, not a path, but a presence. He grew fearful of noise. Morning commotion in the yard, harsh words from his father, creaking gate. The simplest sounds seemed excessive, too loud. A quiet settled within, and only the dreams responded to this new internal state. Then in the days that followed, he found fresh horse tracks in the morning. From the old apple orchard to the gate, no one had heard hooves. No one saw anything. His father shrugged. Probably from our horses. Came from a herd. But the boy knew. None of theirs came that close. And more importantly, they were single tracks. One horse. In the next dream, he moved toward the horse. Everything unfolded slowly, almost motionless. His legs heavy as in dreams. Tall grass. Soft. The horse didn't move. It just looked. And in that gaze were no invitation, no refusal. Only permission. He awoke with the sense they were showing him something. Not a place, not a journey, but a state, internal. Like standing at an edge, not asking what comes next, just standing. In his father's notebook was another margin note. If it appears in a dream, do not follow immediately. Wait for it to come to you. That is how they grant trust. These words echoed in his mind. Each new morning began with brief silence, waiting to see if tracks remained. Several times they did, the same ones, of one horse, always same side, always early morning. Winter air at night grew sharp. Sometimes he walked into the night just to breathe it in. He stood barefoot, gazing into darkness, listening. It seemed the step began to breathe, slowly, measuredly, like the horse. One evening he sat in the yard longer than usual. It was calm. The night did not hurry. Cold had not yet settled. With quiet certainty he knew, tomorrow he must go. Not because something special would happen, but because it already had, and nothing was left but to meet. He awoke before the first rays of sun touched the roof. The sky was dark gray, trembling, the pre-dawn silence held by night, yet with day poised on the threshold. He didn't don anything extra, just a shirt, cloak, boots. The horseshoe felt heavier in his pocket, not physically, but in import. The house slept, the village too. He slipped past the fence without creaking and stepped into cold grass. The tracks remained, fresh, distinct, leading toward familiar hill path into the hills. He walked silently, slowly, without hurry, as if he knew what must occur, wouldn't flee. The step greeted him in usual quiet. Empty horizon under a brightening sky. The air smelled of nighttime damp dust and something familiar. The scent of movement yet to begin, but already breathing at his back. Ahead appeared the hill, low, lone. He had stood there before. It was the place where he first observed the herd, where he saw them pass oblivious to him, and where today he sensed someone else would be. He climbed slowly, no steps from the side, no rustle, nobody. But he knew this wasn't the end. This was the beginning. At the very edge of the clearing he saw him, black, alone, standing calmly and directly, some distance, though now it mattered little. He said nothing, called nothing, took no step, and didn't need to. The horse came, slowly, silently, without fear. It stepped with calm measuredness, as if that which awaits need not hurry. It paused nearly within reach, looked, then laid its head against his shoulder. That motion lasted a few seconds, but they felt longer than all that came before. Not because anything changed, but because everything unneeded fell away. Then the horse stepped away a few paces, turned and ran. It did not flee. It ran toward where the step had no boundary, toward the morning sun. It looked back one last time and then vanished. The boy stood silently. He had no need to pursue. Everything he needed was already here. He stayed on that hill long after, not expecting, not hoping to see more, Because his body refused to move, the tension that had gripped him for weeks dissolved. No more expectation, dreams, nor fear. Silence no longer spoke. It simply was, and he was in it. Faintly came the birds' calls. Skylarks rose on the horizon. For the first time in many days, he felt light, not in body but inside. That which had been unspeakable, that which lingered at the edge of awareness, dissolved, and nothing remained but gratitude. Without address, simply gratitude. He descended the hill when the sun had risen squarely. The way home felt shorter, not in distance but in state. He walked not as he did before. No search, no doubts, only calm. When he returned home, his father was already working in the yard. He asked nothing, only shot a glance, holding the look longer than usual, and continued working. In that look was everything, and understanding, agreement, and maybe even memory. That evening, the boy brought out the horseshoe, wiped it on cloth, and laid it on the table. Simply laid. Now it seemed understandable, no longer heavy. That night he dreamed no more. There was no step, no silhouette, no gaze. And that was right. Some meetings are not meant to repeat. They are the end of a long motion, not to begin again, but to know that you've arrived. For many days following, he walked the same paths. Sometimes he saw herds, sometimes he did not. But each time he saw a black-led horse, he knew this was another. That one has gone. His story did not end. It simply took a different direction. And so did he. In the days that followed, he did not seek answers. He did not pore over the notebook. He did not look skyward, hoping to glimpse the familiar silhouette. But changes occurred, not externally but within. He grew quieter but not withdrawn. Presence deepened. People noticed. Something in his eyes shifted. Hard to define. Depth. Calm. A trace of a road he'd walked and never voiced. He felt no pull toward fame or proof. He simply was. And that was enough. Sometimes at sunset, he walked beyond the village to that same clearing where he first saw the herd. He stood in quiet vigil. Sometimes there was no one. Sometimes distant silhouettes appeared. But he no longer followed. For he knew, some things you need not chase. They find you when the time comes. A week passed. Even peaceful, like a smooth road after long pothole. Days stretched without mark. Everything familiar. Morning bird song, midday air smelling of warm dust, evening descending soft as in childhood. Yet he knew something will happen again. Not because he expected, but because that is how the step flows. When tension departs, closure arrives. Not theatrical, not loud, but simple, calm, final. He rose at dawn before usual. His body knew the way before his mind did. The night had left a trace, not in a dream, but in the very air. There was something calling without noise, a subtle change that would pass unseen, if not for the inner silence. Sunrise began at the horizon. Light poured evenly, awakening old tracks. The boy walked the familiar trail, again, but now without expectation, without searching, without need. When he stepped into the field's edge, the herd was gone. Only grass swayed in a gentle breeze. Yet in that movement, echo of what once moved. Then he saw him, standing apart, alone, on the very edge of the clearing, black as a shadow in the dawn glow. Not like a memory, not like a dream, but as what remained on the other side of all that had been traveled. The boy halted, didn't shift. His heart beat its steady rhythm, no surprise, no fear, only the sense the circle was closing. The horse stood quietly, body upright, eyes clear. A few meters between them, like before. But now that distance held no boundary. It was the content of their silence. No commands, no hands, no halter. Only space. Then the horse approached, step by step, wordless, without tension, and stopped again, close enough to feel breath. Then lowered its head, slowly, gently, resting it on his shoulder, as before. And that was enough. The boy made no move, no word, no thought. He simply stood. Then the horse lifted its head, turned, and walked away, gracefully, as though moving on water. The wind caught its mane. The sunrise traced its outline. It didn't look back, and there was no need. This was the last time. The boy stood long. The wind fell still. The step hushed. Even the skylarks that usually rose at dawn held back today. He did not feel sadness or joy. He felt quiet fulfillment. like when something goes on long and finally becomes clear. He walked back the same trail, but felt his footsteps different now. No search, no doubt, only calm. Time passed. Nobody counted exactly how long. Days became like granules of sand slipped through fingers, each different, yet all of the same nature. In spring, when grass whispered again, he heard new herds appearing nearby. People mentioned it flatly without surprise, as if it always happened. Yet everyone knew it hadn't, not for a long time. Horses arrived by themselves, not captured, not brought, not driven. They came as smoke after fire, as silence after a voice. And there was no miracle, but something else. As permission, elders said the hunting should stop. Horses were not goods. If they came on their own, they must not be touched. Even his father, who had spent his life capturing horses, silently removed his traps from the stable, without explanation, without words, like someone who suddenly remembered something important. And the boy knew it was not because of him, nor because of the horse. It simply happened, like ripening, like dew lying evenly on time's line. And each time at night he heard hooves in the field. He no longer went out, didn't watch, for he knew all is in place, all is alive, and nothing more is needed. 2 decades passed since that spring. Official figures show the wild horse population in the steppe regions more than doubled. At first slowly, 1 or 2 herds per year, then steadily, and within 10 years, wild horses again became an inseparable part of the landscape. People stopped capturing them, not because it was outlawed, but because they simply stopped wanting to. Younger generations grew up accustomed to living alongside herds without disturbing their movement. School children painted horses on classroom walls. Teachers taught not how to capture them, but how to observe and not interfere. In local farms, domestic horses remained, those raised with respect, but wild ones roamed free, in the wind, in the dust, without brands, without fences. Authorities later officially designated the area zones of natural coexistence. No fences, no boundaries, nature and people, together. And most importantly, these changes didn't bring loss. On the contrary, they stabilized soils, improved water tables, reduced erosion, because horses didn't destroy, they balanced. International biologists surveyed and found that the local population became the most resilient in the region and one of the least aggressive, because no one bothered them and no one taught them fear. When people asked the man what had changed everything, he simply replied, I just didn't get in the way. And perhaps that answer was the most significant of all. Because sometimes a great change requires very little, just stepping aside and allowing what wishes to live, to live.